Hey, Amal. How are you doing? Osahan, Miss Lily, how are you? Missed you the other day. I don't think you were here the other day. Nada, how are you? We'll get started here in about 3 or 4 minutes. So, Tyler, what's up, man? Glad to see you guys, coming in. Let me see here. Let me do this. There we go. All right. Hey, Yvette, how are you? Hey, Abby, what's up? Hey, it's all right, Elaine. Don't worry about it. It's online if you want to watch it. You don't have to worry about doing this on time. That's for sure. All right, who is Hobby Lilafu 0218? Hey, Bavesh. Yes, be sure to get some paper out to take some notes, of course. Oh, more Haltom kids. Wow, that's nice. Look at us, Ridge. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Hey, Kelly, how are you doing? Nice. Well, welcome. Hey, Lauren, how are you doing today? What's up, Patrick? Yeah, I see that. Over 200 now. Jace, how are you doing? All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I do have a faculty meeting at 3 o'clock I need to attend, so I just want to make sure I get through, all of this. Just a couple of administration things that I need to take care of. I am attending this faculty meeting because they are going to talk about the grading policy that's going to be implemented. It is a pass-fail, and it all depends on participation level. There are no grades per se being taken, but it is up to me to determine if you participate enough to get that passing grade of 100 or that fail grade of 69. And some of those questions that we have as teachers will be cleared up this afternoon. So just be ready. Just be ready for any email on that. I know the district has already sent out an email concerning that. But once we clarify some things, I do have a couple of questions about it. Once we do clarify some things, I will make sure I send that out to you guys through email and through Remind as well. All right? Because there are still a bunch of kids that I have not heard a thing from in the last 3 weeks. So I'm a little concerned I'm not getting to them, and we'll just have to work through that. Okay. Let's get going. So today we are still dealing with Unit 2.4, or Unit 2, and we're in the section of 2.4, which we're going to be talking about the Trans-Saharan routes. Remember, this is networks of exchange. That's what we're talking about here. And of course, we've already done the Silk Road, we've done the Mongols, we've done the Indian Ocean, and now the third major one of this global tapestry is the Trans-Saharan routes, and it cannot be overlooked and it cannot be underrated as well, because it is very, very important. You get big players in it like Ibn Battuta, Mansa Musa, and you get the spread of Islam. This area cannot be overlooked, all right? It will not be, it will remain a very important trade system until it is going to be completely overtaken by the Atlantic trade system, which, will be coming up in a unit or two. All right, so first of all, the Trans-Saharan trade takes place over the Sahara Desert. And your visual there to the left shows where the Sahara Desert is. And it takes up a large chunk of a very large continent here. It's about 3.6 million square miles. Oases are established where human settlements are possible, and that's what I show here in this second visual right here. That is an oasis where there is an underground water aquifer, which can, produce trees and things of that nature where actually humans can live. Water is available from these very deep underground wells that people have to tap into. It's not a very easy thing, that's for sure. Part of the Trans-Saharan trade that we need to make sure that we understand is the camel. All right, this is what makes this trade go. It is the camel and the camel saddle. Camels began to replace horses and donkeys after about 300 CE because horses and donkeys can't travel over long distances without water. All right. Camel saddles allow for more cargo to be carried. Caravans were predominant across the Sahara, and you're talking, a caravan of, hundreds of animals or so. All right. And of course, gold is one of the most precious commodities for trade. And as we learned in class this year, salt is a very important trade commodity, along with some textiles, and horses are being traded as well during this time period. Okay, so we see a lot of West African empires beginning to grow at this time. And the first one we're going to deal with today is Mali here. All right, it profited from the gold trade, but it also taxed nearly all of the trade entering West Africa. So if you were coming in from outside of Mali and you had things to sell, you were taxed on that. All right, so that was another way for Mali to make money. Cities of Timbuktu, right here, Gao and Genet. If you take a look at them, they're on rivers, and that's important for trade as well. This is where a lot of the wealth developed in these empires, the Mali Empire especially. Muslim life was really huge in these areas as well. Timbuktu was known as a center of learning. It had a very, very large library. 1,500 books are created and sold in Timbuktu and brought prices higher than most any other goods. That's how important knowledge, that's how important education was to merchants and to people that practiced Islam. That was a huge deal to them. Along with West African empire expansion is the role of the state. What does the government do to help here? So that role expands as these empires get larger and larger. A common currency is needed, and they need to protect the trade routes. They expand to take over resource-rich areas as well. And with each expansion, more and more people are brought into the economy and trade networks. And it brings people into contact with other people from distant cultures. This is Sundiata. He is considered the Lion King, okay? Mansa Musa, who is his nephew, comes after him, of course, to rule Mali, which will bring it to its greatest period. But Sundiata here is the first, okay? He establishes this large kingdom. He is crippled as a boy, all right? Before he takes over, his family is killed, all right? Another group of invaders come into Mali, and they kill his family. They kill his dad, they kill his mom, they kill his brothers, and anybody that could be a potential heir to the throne. Well, they leave little Sundiata alone because Sundiata is lame and he is crippled. So he lives, but the thing is, he grows up. He grows out of this physical disability that he had and becomes a great warrior. And with this, he is able to take over Mali once again, and and create this large empire. He is considered, he is Muslim. He connects to other Islamic areas and cultivates this thriving gold trade. And under his leadership, Mali grows tremendously wealthy here. And let me see here. So after Sundiata dies, in a few years, his nephew will take over, and he is Mansa Musa. All right, he is the grandnephew of Sundiata, so it's a couple of generations removed. And like Sundiata, he is a devout Muslim. He begins his Hajj, his pilgrimage to Mecca. And he takes along a huge caravan, of course. This is what he's most known for. 100 camels, thousands of slaves, and gold to distribute to people, on his journey. He wants to display his wealth. As he returns, he builds mosques and religious schools and sponsors those who wanted to continue their religious studies. So he is a huge benefactor in this area of the world. In 2012, on a website called Celebrity Net Worth, they took out a list of the world's 25 wealthiest people of all time, and after adjusting for inflation, Mansa Musa was on top of the list. He was above Bill Gates. He's above Warren Buffett. It is calculated his worth was around 400 billion, that is billion, at the time of his death, all right? So, again, the primary reason behind his extraordinary wealth was that Mali was responsible for half of the salt and half of the gold trade in the world at the time. But only about 100 years after Mansa Musa's death, Mali completely falls apart, and it falls apart to the Songhai kingdom, which becomes actually larger and richer than Mali. But the one thing you have to remember about Mansa Musa, he had a huge impact. It was the idea is that he strengthened Islam in West Africa, and he succeeded in doing that because Islam is a very, very important religion in Africa to this day. So that kind of brings us to the end of our Trans-Saharan trade routes. Again, keep in mind what types of products they had, how was it transported, and the effects of people like Mansa Musa and Sundiata and how they were able to promote this wealth and be able to spread this wealth and also spread their religion. All right, so that ends Trans-Saharan trade routes. We're going to take a look at cultural connectivity here in just a moment. I'm going to take a look to see if you have any questions here. Oh, no questions, which is good. All right, take a couple moments, kind of, recharge here, and then we'll get into the next part of the lecture. Joa, this one's only 9 slides long. All right, so there you go. Yeah, Eric, Mansa Musa went to Mecca because of his Hajj. Remember, the Hajj is one of the 5 pillars that Islam or Muslims have to follow, and you are supposed to travel to Mecca once in your lifetime, this pilgrimage once in your lifetime, and Mansa Musa made his way during this time. How do you spell the 2 names? Okay, I'm going to go with Sundiata first, all right? Very simple, Sundiatta, Sundiata. And then Mansa Musa, 2 words there, Mansa, M-A-N-S-A, and then Musa, M-U-S-A, Patrick. The last EQ, let me look here. I will read it to you here in a second. All right, the last EQ, who was it that asked that? Dylan. What were the causes and effects of TransSaharan trade, and how did the growth of empires influence trade and communication? That was our last EQ. All right, you guys ready to go? I hope so, because we need to get going. Okay, so with all this connectivity going on across the world, all this trade that's going on, and people coming into contact with each other, you're going to have some consequences culturally. All right, so we're going to take a look at things. The question here is, what were the intellectual and cultural effects of the trade networks from 1200 to 1450? We saw what causes trade to happen. All right, why does it become so big? And there's a variety of things: technology, camels, religion, all that stuff helps trade expand. So now what are the consequences of that? And we need to take a look at that, and it's very, very important that we do. All right. Okay. So the one thing you have to keep in mind is that you're going to have religious, cultural, and technological effects of interaction. Now, new religions begin to be formed. They serve to unify people. These religions provide justification for a king's leadership, influence of the arts, of where it spread and fused or coexisted with native religions, influence of Buddhism in East Asia. Buddhism spreads into East Asia in the 7th century from India. All right, it actually comes out of Nepal. This is where Buddhism spreads. Nepal is the birthplace of Buddhism. All right, and as Buddhism spreads, it comes into contact with Confucianism. It comes into contact with Hinduism. So you get syncretic religions such as Chan Buddhism being created. Buddhist writers write in the vernacular language of China, not in the formal Confucian's language of the scholars. The practice becomes widespread, so you start to see Buddhist scripts and writings everywhere. And with this makes Buddhist scriptures available to many in places like Japan and Korea, where Buddhism spreads along with Confucianism here. In Korea, the elite studied Confucianism, the peasants studied Buddhism. Remember, Buddhism is is accepted in your lower classes because it makes everyone equal, just like Christianity, just like Islam. It's a universal type of religion because everyone, no matter what your race, creed, gender is, everyone is looked at the same. It's looked at, as an equity and an equality thing. Neo-Confucianism fuses rational thought with Buddhism and Taoism. So you start to see all these religions beginning to coexist in areas, and some of them even change a little bit due to where and who they come into contact with. All right. The spread of Buddhism and Hinduism goes into Southeast Asia. All right. It doesn't stay at home here. Sirajava Empire on Sumatra becomes Hindu. Java becomes Buddhist. That's in this area of the world here. All right. The Khmer Empire, the most successful kingdom in Southeast Asia. That is right here. They are Hindu and Buddhist. And then, of course, the spread of Islam happens in Africa, South Asia, and also Southeast Asia. Islam today The second largest population of Muslims living in the world live in Southeast Asia, and that is why, and that just goes back because of this interaction that we see because of the trade routes. All right, again, this is just a chart from the textbook. It talks about cultural influences of Islam in, Afro-Eurasia and Africa. We get the Swahili language being developed. Timbuktu becomes a center of Islamic learning. Leaders of African states deepen Islamic ties through their pilgrimages to Mecca. Mansa Musa is part of that. In South Asia, before Islam, Hinduism and Buddhism are popular, but after Islam arrives, people begin to convert to Islam. The Urdu language had influences from Sanskrit-based Hindi as well as Arabic and Farsi, which is a Persian language. So you get new languages being created. And then in Southeast Asia, you begin to see Muslim rulers on Java combining with Mughal Indian features, local traditions. So we got this huge tapestry of religions really blending together here, especially in Southeast Asia. All right, going on. All right. Also, we need to take a look at technological developments of these interactions. Scientific and tech innovations begin to just explode. Travel helps the routes as well. The lateen sail, compasses, astrolabe, astronomical charts. And I have told you this over and over and over and again. And it is because it is very, very important to understand, because without these things, we might not have this interaction. Islamic scholars translate Greek literature, classics, into Arabic. Math from India, things like geometry come out of and calculus come out of India. Papermaking from China. The printing press will eventually spread to Europe, which will eventually increase literacy as well. Improvements in agricultural efficiency. Again, what I said before, we have better seafaring, technology here. All right. Also in this era, you see cities begin to decline. Okay, you have nomadic invaders in China. The Ottomans take over the city of Constantinople in 1453, which had already been weakened due to the Crusades. And speaking about the Crusades, you get new connections happening due to Europeans coming into contact with Islamic and Byzantine cultures. And with all this warfare going on in some of these cities, you see trade decline a little bit in these cities. And when trade declines in these cities, other cities kind of take their place as well. And then, of course, you have the Black Plague, which travels across the routes. And it decimates Europe. It moves into Europe via the trade routes. All right. Let's see here. All right. So taking a look at a guy by the name of Marco, Polo. He is an Italian merchant. He heads into Asia, and he spends a lot of time in the court of Kublai Khan under the Mongol dynasty. And why do I bring this up? Because he writes about it, or people that are with him write about it, and it gets people in Europe interested in what Asia has to offer. And one of the things he wrote, he says, they use paper money as currency. The men as well as the women are fair-skinned and handsome. Most of them dress themselves in silk as a result of the vast quantities of the material produced in Hangzhou, exclusive of what the merchants import from other provinces. So by writing this, Europeans are reading this going, holy cow, this is really cool. I want me some of that. So this interest in China begins to grow, and not just only in China, in Asia in general. All right, then we have another traveler, and his name is Ibn Battuta here. And one thing about Ibn Battuta, he is a 14th century traveler, and he traveled for 30 years. Now, he was a little bit different than Marco Polo. Marco Polo was looking at things from a merchant's point of view. Ibn Battuta looked at things from an Islamic point of view. His journey was to learn as much as he could about Islam and its people. So when you take a look at his routes here, all across the Middle East, over here into South Asia, and he does actually make it over here into China as well. But the majority of them are in Islamic countries because he did want to learn as much as possible. And again, traveling, it leaves you speechless. Then it turns you into a storyteller. He was one of these guys that wrote about it, and as people read, they tended to want to know more. This interest tended to grow a lot in people who hadn't traveled this far. Another person we need to talk about here real quick, her name is Marjorie Kemp, K-E-M-P-E, Marjorie Kemp. She was an English mystic, and she went on a pilgrimage herself. She wrote a book describing her pilgrimages, and she went to Jerusalem, Rome, Germany, and Spain. Now, why do I bring this up? It is significant because it is the first-hand account of a middle-class medieval woman's life. All right? Women don't do this at this time. They do not travel like this. That's left up to the men. Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and probably several others that we don't know a whole lot about. But Marjorie Kemp was one of the first women to do this and write about it. And in her writings, it's like a personal narrative. It's a diary of sorts. And she conveys both the intense spiritual visions and the feelings of her mystical experience and the trials of everyday life. And she traveled with 14 children. All right? That's like me taking half of my class on a journey, that lasts 2 years. No way would I do that. But there she was, this medieval woman doing the same thing. All right. So that brings us to the end of this cultural connectivity. What happens due to trade culturally? All right. And then our last one that we're going to take a look at today, we're going to take a look at how this connectivity impacted the environment. All right. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments to kind of reset, and then we'll go on. And I'll take a look at questions. She didn't write her accounts? Is that, Lily, is that what you're asking? She didn't write her? Yeah, she wrote her accounts of her travels. I mean, this is typically an explorer, a traveler that we don't talk too much about. I mean, it's usually the big two, Polo and Battuta. Kemp is not a huge one that we talk about, but this is one thing that College Board likes to ask. They like to ask about these small minority groups or how women impact certain things, and Marjorie Kemp would be a great thing to bring up in whatever type of essay writing they're going to be asking us to do. Yeah, she was illiterate. Mr. Klaus, we should do what? Margie did. Yeah. No, I am not doing that at all. So. Okay, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get started on our last one here as soon as I get my PowerPoint pulled up on my phone here. My notes. And there we go. And here we go. Okay, let's talk about environmental consequences of this connection between different areas of the world. And when I talk about environmental consequences, it's usually talking about food and diseases. And, College Board likes to bring up, like bananas. Where did they come from? Where did they go? Choppa Rice, another one of those things. So our question is, what are some of the environmental effects of trade in Afro-Eurasia from 1200 to 1450? And of course, you can probably already guess. You can probably already guess that the bubonic plague or the Black Death is going to be a part of that as well. All right. So first of all, let's take a look at Choppa Rice and the importance of agricultural effects here. Migration of crops. They do not always stay in one place because they can be grown in several different areas. And Choppa Rice from Vietnam to China is huge. Now, some scholars do believe, now it's not going to be probably tested over or anything like that, but some scholars believe Choppa Rice actually may have come through India. We're not real sure about that, but that is just another theory that's out there. But for our purposes, we're going to say Choppa Rice came from Vietnam. Now, why is Choppa Rice important? Well, for one, it's drought resistant. It can grow very, very fast in areas that do not get a lot of rain at times. It can yield 2 crops in a year, and it could be grown in areas where crops had never been able to grow. So this here, Choppa Rice, is very, very important because it will help the Chinese population grow by, leaps and bounds. And here, another crop. You have bananas. All right, bananas travel from Indonesia way down here, or way down here. Here's Indonesia, all the way to Africa. And eventually, those bananas will be sent, we don't have it on the map here, will be sent to Central America and South America, where they'll grow, like crazy there too. So bananas and Choppa Rice are very, very huge when we talk about agricultural types of products that are brought together. Arabian traders, sugar and citrus crops, and cotton to Europe. Here again, we see where sugar begins. Here, and it is brought, and citrus is, originally down in here, and then it eventually makes its way all the way over here. Now, it takes about 1,000 years, but it gets there. So you have sugar, you have bananas, you have Choppa Rice, and cotton, same way, begins to make its way across the world here. Now, we do have some bad things that happen because of this here. You get environmental degradation, overgrazing of grasslands by cattle. Deforestation leads to soil erosion. Great Zimbabwe. This is Great Zimbabwe down here. Is a huge and a very important early African city in southeast Africa, but it was abandoned due to overgrazing. Their cattle tended just to eat up all of the food that was available, and then they, probably experienced some environmental issues, some climate issue where they did not get rain for several seasons, and they couldn't grow any more crops, so they just abandoned their settlement there. And then, of course, another thing, the spread of epidemics through these exchange networks. And I think I've showed you this map before, but again, it's very important that we understand this. It spreads into Europe, North Africa, China, Central Asia. 25 million Chinese die between 1332 and 1347, so in about a 15-year period. Estimates of when it hits Europe in the middle of the 14th century, about 1348. When it gets there, 1347. By the time it's all said and done, about a third to half of the population of Europe dies. And that is going to create some huge issues politically and culturally, especially for the Catholic Church. And next week, we'll get into that a little bit. Now, this area of the world down here, as you see, was spared. All right. for a variety of reasons. You have this huge, you have this huge desert here, right? So nothing travels across the desert there too much. And then you have very few trading ports along this area at the time. So it doesn't tend to spread into South Africa that much. So you have crop migrations from across the world due to this trade. And then, of course, you have the spread of diseases, and the big one, of course, is the bubonic plague. All right, so look at that, guys. 30 minutes, and I am done. Okay, on Friday, we're going to kind of bring this all together. Maybe I will have some sort of a writing prompt for you to take a look at, an FRQ prompt, and then also I will be able to discuss what the test, the AP exam, is going to look like. I'm part of a group that's going to be on a webinar tomorrow night with College Board, and they will release what they have to the public on Friday. So hopefully by the time we talk again on Friday, I will know a little bit more about the tests and what it'll all involve. So please attend that. All right. Well, I'm out. That about does it for me for today. I do have to get ready for a faculty meeting here shortly. So hopefully everyone's doing well. You're all staying sane, and you're staying indoors to make sure that you're not spreading this virus.